Hello, everybody. This is the start of our today's webinar, and it's some deviation from the normal Metaform webinar series. It's aimed more to practitioners, and it's not so academic it's not meant to be so academic. Excuse me, Emanuele, if I'm wrong. That's the other ones, and that has to do with my background. I'm mostly interested in practical applications. And what we want to do today is to talk about the relationship between two specific organizational models. The RenDanHeYi model of the Chinese manufacturer Haier and VSM. And as I presume that most of us or all of us are very familiar with the VSM, I will not add a VSM introduction to that, but Emanuele will give us a brief introduction into RenDanHeYi. And after that, my role would be to ask questions to better focus on the differences and the relationships between RenDanHeYi and the VSM. So I think Emanuele, you would like to introduce yourself. So
yeah,
great,
definitely.
So I just want to shut up with the introduction, then we can start with the content. Emanuele, please.
So thanks for having me, and very nice to be here. So my name is Emanuele Quintarelli. I'm one of the partners of a small consulting company called Boundaryless, and I spent the last more than 23 years in supporting very large and complex organizations, mostly traditional organizations, corporations, that wanted on one side to become more efficient, but on the other side that wanted to be more adaptive and humane, especially. So I explored the many models. Actually, I'm trained in sociocracy, in holacracy, and a few of the other buzzwords that you may have heard around. But I would say that the RenDanHeYi is the most surprising and aggressive, if you want, of all of them. So happy to be here and to share a bit. Boundaryless is a company providing training and consulting to corporations that does most of its work in open source. So most of our content is free. We publish canvases and guides. All of them are free. Even our competitors are using them. Some of them have been downloaded hundreds of thousands of times, even used by the United Nations. So I don't want to talk too much about the company, but if you are interested to explore more, just reach out. So let's talk about the RenDanHeYi. I will give you a brief introduction. So basically, I will use one slide to let you see the foundational constructs on which the RenDanHeYi is based. But again, feel free to ask questions if you want to know more, and we will explore more with Krishan during the conversation. So the story started actually many years ago. So this is not a new model. It's one of the old models, because in 1982, the household appliances division of one of the municipalities in Qingdao was basically on the brink of bankruptcy. Most of their products, they were producing fridges, refrigeration. Most of their products were defective. They had 10 millions of debt, and both customers and employees were dissatisfied. At that point, it wasn't that strange. That was very common in China. Customers were used to buy products that didn't work. So they would buy the product, bring it home, repair it, and use it. But this company, this municipality, decided to take a different route. And they nominated a young manager called Jiang Ruimin as the director of the municipality. And Jiang Guimin had totally different ideas about how a modern company should work. And he invited 76 of his colleagues in a hall of the division, gave them hammers, and asked them to destroy 76 fridges. And the cost of a fridge in China was 2 years of Chinese salary at that point. So it was, a massive damage, but also a huge symbol about the kind of company he wanted to see. And he said, if we don't destroy these refrigerators today, what is to be shattered by the market in the future will be this enterprise. That was the beginning of more than 40 years of transformation. Jiang Guimin retired 2 years ago. He's still the chairman emeritus of Hire. But since then, he has been known as the CEO philosopher because he's been able to bridge both Western and Eastern philosophy as an amazing tools for business transformation. In 86, the municipality went back to profitability, and in 92, he became the CEO of Hire Group. Hire Group today is the global leader of white good appliances, and they acquired Hire, acquired the Candy Hoover in Europe. They acquired General Electric appliances in the USA, Sankyo in Asia, becoming one of the biggest, more than 80,000 people and powerful companies in the space. The interesting thing for us, nonetheless, is not so much the results, but how they achieved them. And this happened through a number of transformations. Actually, there has been a continuous, constant transformation of the business model, of the strategy of the company, and the organizational culture and organization design. I won't get into the details of each transformation, but in a nutshell, they went from a traditional company, a traditional top-down command and control company, as most of the market still is today, to a matrix organization, then starting to reverse let's say, the direction of power and decision making in the firm. So they introduced the strategic business units, then they inverted the pyramid, they put the customer at the center, and eventually they gave birth to what is now known as the RenDanHeYi. The RenDanHeYi, as we will see, is not so much a traditional organization chart, but more a network of autonomous enterprises, a sort of entrepreneurial ecosystem. And it's probably the most diverse organizational model in the world at this point. And still, there are hundreds of thousands of companies and all the major business schools that are studying it and trying to make sense of what Hire did. Our interest as Boundaryless is not so much about the RenDanHeYi or Hire, but about how to take inspiration from it in cultures that are very far from the Chinese one, in countries that are different from China, in sectors that are different from manufacturing, in places in which you don't have Chairman Jiang to guide the transformation. So the interest is really going deeper and trying to understand what we can learn from Hire experience. And there are many companies, corporations, and smaller companies just doing it right now. This more than 35 years of change actually had two goals in mind. The first one was to put the customer at the center, to improve the customer experience. And as you will see, this is really a pillar of the RenDanHeYi. They talk about zero distance because the organizational model, and that's the meaning of the name, puts every employee in touch with every customer to create and share value together. So it's really about removing the distance between the inside and outside of the firm, building, we would say, a boundaryless firm. And this is not conceptual, it's really happening in terms of compensation, in terms of decision-making, in terms of strategy. The second goal they had in mind was treating employees as adults unleashing the human potential, making employees their own CEOs, letting them decide, and decentralizing decisions from the board or the senior leadership to the points of contact with the market and with customers. They went through a number of experiments, but these two objectives really never changed. And those objectives are, I think, interesting for many more organizations than just Hire. There are, before going to the slide synthesis of the model, I think there are a few ideas behind the RenDanHeYi. The first one is that the first goal of a company is to have a customer. So this is not coming from Hire, but it's really in a nutshell what the RenDanHeYi does. It reorients the company around customer needs. It iterates value creation with customers. Actually, it let customers pay employees, not the company, but customers are directly paying companies through, of course, their wallet. The second idea is that organizations should look much more like markets. So inside the organization, we have the same dynamics, the same collaboration, but also competition sometimes that you may expect in the market. And also the lack of bureaucracy that you expect from the market. Because one of the goals of the RenDanHeYi is to destroy, is to get rid of any intermediate layer, any bureaucratic layer in the firm. The third point is that this is an adaptive organization model. I would say there is no model. It's a constant flux. It's a constant adaptation. Some of the ideas I will share today emerged only a few years ago, not from the CEO, but from people in the organization, because they had experimented and they had found better ways to do things. And the last two is unlocking entrepreneurship. This is strictly an entrepreneurial model. Employees are treated like entrepreneurs. Sometimes they are owners of parts of the company. Sometimes they are only allowed to act as entrepreneurs, but formally they have all the freedom that the traditional entrepreneurs would have, but inside the corporation. And the same freedom, the last point, is left also to team members. So it's not only those responsible for a certain unit or managers. Actually, there are no managers at all. But each individual is given the opportunity, but also the responsibility to act as an entrepreneur, to take freedom, to decide, to get upsides and sometimes also the downsides connected to their decisions. I believe this is, the future of the market, not so much because of Hire, but because we all see the uncertainty, the volatility, the unpredictability in the market. COVID-19, Ukraine, I think we have learned the lesson. And now we know that having a robust mechanic, command and control, static firm won't allow us to survive, but won't even allow us to be efficient, because our customers want many products, their needs are changing, competitors are becoming global, digital and AI are growing, and so on. So it's a constant challenge, and unless you can adapt or even anticipate the market, you will be doomed. So the RenDanHeYi. What's in the RenDanHeYi? Well, this is the RenDanHeYi. Very simple, if you want, just a picture, but very different from, I think, most of the organization chart you have seen before. The basic unit of the RenDanHeYi is the Migrant Enterprise. The Migrant Enterprise is a small team. It's usually 10, 12 people with lots of freedom. They have freedom to decide what to do. So to decide their product, decide their services, decide their strategy. They have freedom about picking the people that should be in the team. And they also have freedom about sharing the value, so money, compensation, that is generated by the Migrant Enterprise to the people within the Migrant Enterprise. So It's like a small company. You can decide what to do. You can decide who to hire. You can decide how much to pay them. And the people within the migrant enterprise, again, are entrepreneurs. So they have lots of space to decide. They can even decide if joining a migrant enterprise or not. There are actually two types of migrant enterprises: user migrant enterprises. These are the customer-facing migrant enterprises, those in touch with the market. Think about customer acquisition, think about sales, think about support. And then there are node migrant enterprises, the majority usually, that are giving services to user migrant enterprises. So they are giving services to their colleagues. At this point in time, Hire, a company with 80,000 people, has 4,000 migrant enterprises. 300 of them are user migrant enterprises. 3,700 are node migrant enterprises, just to give you an idea. So the huge monolith, a robust corporation, is fragmented, we tend to say unbundled, in many self-contained migrant enterprises. So each one of them exposes a set of a catalog of services, and it's responsible for the profit and loss. So they have responsible for the revenues, they are responsible for the services they buy because they have to pay for them. But unbundling the firm, it's only the first step. And to be sincere, it's not so uncommon. If we go back to 1959, Kyocera with amoeba management has been doing self-management like this. So this is not totally new. And there are many other examples, from Valve to Zappos to PureZorg to Morningstar. So fragmenting the firm, it's not new, but the amount of freedom that Hire gives to migrant enterprises is kind of new. But what is even stronger is the second level. To Hire, it's not enough to fragment the firm in many small teams. They wanted to find a way to facilitate the collaboration between migrant enterprises without management and without hierarchy. So they came up a few years ago with this idea of an ecosystem microcommunity. Ecosystem microcommunity, it's a community of migrant enterprises. It's a collaboration of migrant enterprises. There is not an organizational unit. There is no manager. There is no supervising them. It's a contract. So migrant enterprise come together as peers to do something that they cannot do in isolation. So when I feel there is a need in the market, I'm not able to fulfill this need, I ask for help. I raise my hand and say, okay, who can help me? Which other nodes in the system would like to participate to this EMC, to this ecosystem micro community? So these nodes come together to achieve something for the customer, to build what they call the user scenario, to differentiate the firm and to create something that doesn't exist in the market. They do that, of course, to generate revenues, but also by sharing the revenues they have generated with each other based on the contribution they give to the migrant enterprise, to the EMC. So the more the contribution, the more the percentage, for example, of the profits of the EMC each node will get. This is ecosystemic because there are only two possibilities. The EMC will succeed and each node will be paid based on the agreements, or the EMC will fail, won't achieve the results, and nobody will get profit sharing. So each node is invited to support the others, even if that's not their responsibility, because they want to get this value-added sharing, as Hire call it. So it's about aligning interest. It's about being in the same boat and trying to help each other at the benefit of the market, of the customer. A point I forgot about the migrant enterprise is that the salary of employees within a migrant enterprise is not decided by Hire. It's decided by the migrant enterprise itself. And it's based on the amount of value that the migrant enterprise generates on the market. So you are paid by your customers. You are not paid by hire. If the micro enterprise is super successful, well, you may become rich. If the micro enterprise fail, you will be invited to find another role in a different micro enterprise or to create a different micro enterprise. Up to this point, micro enterprises, ecosystem micro communities, everything looks a bit distributed. There is no center. There is no centralization in this organization. Everything is distributed in many nodes. Today, Hire has something like 700 EMCs. So there are many of them. So the question is, how can we keep the system together if we don't have managers, if each node can do basically what it wants to do, right? The answer is the last level, the platforms. So the platforms are what gives unity and identity and cohesion to the model. But the platforms are not bosses. They are not controlling. They are more like nudging systems. And there are two types of platforms. The first one is shared service platforms. Shared service platforms are actually micro enterprises providing standard services. Think about IT, finance, HR, branding, legal, to all the other micro enterprises. So it's the result of fragmenting, unbundling functional support functions into smaller entrepreneurial teams. So even support functions are put under pressure and asked to become micro enterprise. In this case, micro enterprises that offer standard services to the others. But even more interesting is the last concept, the industry platform. The industry platform, it's a way to fragment the strategy of the company. Traditionally, the strategy is the responsibility of a small senior leadership team, deciding what to do, deciding the investments, the priorities, deciding to steer, and then cascading down through objectives, all these intentions. Well, platforms are a bit different. Industry platforms are like big strategic bets. So the company each year decides we want to invest in this direction, in this direction, in this direction, and we put money on the table. So they say, okay, Internet of Food for us is a priority. Let's put 1 billion on the table. Let's create an industry platform. And the industry platform will act as a sort of VC, investing in micro enterprises, investing in EMCs, and nudging them to create new products and services in the market. So the platform is not the boss, the industry platform is not the boss, but it's a way to give a bit of direction. It's true that you are free with a micro enterprise to create different products or services, not under an industry platform, but in that case, you won't get any investment. So if you want to get the investment, you will align to the priorities that have been set through industry platforms. And as we will see in the conversation, there is a specific contract for doing it. There is a specific investment contract called the VAM, Valuation Adjustment Mechanism, through which the micro enterprise negotiates the resources, but also the targets and its strategy with the industry platform. But again, this is not a boss-employee relationship. It's more an investor-investee relationship. And you could actually get investments from outside if you are not in line with an industry platform. And that's totally fine, because as you can see from this picture, the boundaries are dashed in the sense that the boundary is porous. So you can be within the system, or you can be beyond the system, as my company is, and still get access to some of these ideas and some of these resources. My company is into an EMC, with one Migrant Enterprise from hire, and we are not part of hire. So again, it's the idea is to use this to engage partners, suppliers, universities, startups, individuals to build the value together. And hire has been doing this many, many times. So let me stop here. This is really, in a nutshell, the three main concepts of the model, but happy to explore more. There is much more to say, of course, during the conversation and based on your questions. Krishan.
Thank you, Emanuele. That was a great overview. I have structured my question a little bit. I'm cheating because, of course, I structure them according to the systems of the VSM, but I'm trying not to use the VSM vocabulary, instead start with more generic question. The first, you have talked about autonomy. And if I look from a VSM perspective, I have some rules. Rule number one is design for autonomy of each individual system. Rule number two is if the system cannot do things by itself, rely on horizontal coordination. Mm-hmm. How do you compare this with RenDanHeYi?
And we're answering this question, Mark. The answer is yes and yes. So let's go back to it. So yes, the basic idea is that it's freedom. And that's a bit paradoxical to see that in China, to be sincere. But nonetheless, this is coming from Taoism and Eastern philosophy. So Zhang Ruimin used to say, every empire will eventually collapse, but a rainforest may survive forever. So what he's saying is that we don't care about the tree. The tree will die. Some trees will die, but we want to create the conditions, so we could say, talking about complexity, the enabling constraints for the forest to survive and to thrive. And they believe that the only way to do it is autonomy. So if you want to control, if you want to centralize, if you want to have a neat system with precise boundaries and decisions, you may be lucky this year, next year, 3 years, but then, COVID, and then Ukraine, and then Google, then there could be many conditions bringing you to failure. Instead, if you can see the organization as a portfolio of experiments based on autonomy, yeah, you may fail sometime, but you will succeed overall. So autonomy is is a basic concept, and it's based on this idea of unleashing the human potential. So believing that human beings are adults, we shouldn't treat them as kids, and that's what we do in traditional companies. On the other side, as I was trying to say, there are means of coordination. This is not anarchy. It's still a corporation. The point of attention here is to reduce this coordination as much as possible to have some minimum viable structure. And in higher coordination means the industry platforms, as I said. So if you want investment, you have to negotiate. So the industry platform could say, listen, there is another migrant enterprise doing exactly what you want to do. Maybe it's best not to duplicate. Or they could say, go ahead, fight with them, let's see what happens. It's their call. Or they could say, listen, this year we want to prioritize this area. If you feel like building value here, I will invest in you. So it's a nudge system. It's not a control system. So this is not a peer-to-peer coordination. It's a bit more, if you want, top-down coordination. But at the same time, you have EMCs that are the horizontal coordination. Nobody can be forced to join an EMC. You can only attract people to join an EMC because you are showing them there is a chance in the market, there is an opportunity in the market, and there is a need for what they do best. So you ask them, you invite them to join. But again, if you want to have Ronaldo in your team, right, you have to negotiate with him. You have to find conditions for him to be happy to join. So something I didn't say is that this allocation of resources happens through an order bidding mechanism. So everything is supported by technology. When you want to get help, you post a request in a system, it's an order, and other people can bid on that order and say, okay, I have the capability and the capacity to do exactly what you ask. In exchange for that, I would like to get 10% of the profit. Are you okay with that? Let's talk. And there are other matters, such as operational reputation to, let's say, maintain this effective collaboration. But in a nutshell, industry platform and the EMCs are the coordination mechanism. So it's not an hierarchy. It's, I would say, more like a complex adaptive system, emerging, but trying to let the structure to emerge from the system and from its strange attractors. It's not so much do whatever you do, because you can do whatever you do, but you won't last much, because if you are not able to generate revenues, you are dead.
So, second question is that VSM has a mechanism of recursivity, so that you create a new system out of smaller individual systems, and you can do this on several levels. Mm-hmm. And it's always the same basic structure. It's a system, and it has some similar functions on each level. Mm-hmm. I've seen now two levels, micro enterprises and EMCs. How can you deal with growth or scalability or recursivity?
So that's an interesting question, because strictly speaking, the RenDanHeYi is not fractal. It's not. So it's not true. And this is my conversation with Mark Lambert. So in his book, he says, you will find the same structure if you look into a micro enterprise. That's not exactly right. There is a bit more structure than what I described in the picture. So for example, industry platforms, you may have an industry platform within an industry platform. So you could say Internet of Food that will have cooling within it. Why? Because that's a big part of the business. They want to stress it. But it's not fractal. It's a bit decomposing some structures in smaller structures. At the same time, there are some micro enterprises that are very big. Think about teams with hundreds of people. You need structure within that. So you may have smaller teams that don't have a profit loss autonomy within a micro enterprise. But the structure is not fractal because it's not so much based on theory. It's more based on practice. And up to this point, 80,000 people, they didn't need it. So they didn't need to replicate, for example, SSPs, shared service platforms, within a micro enterprise. They prefer to use the node micro enterprises to give specific support services to others. And they incentivize these nodes to find multiple internal clients. So not to support only a micro enterprise, but to look for more so to look for recurring needs that they could serve. So strictly speaking, it's not fractal. In reality, it's a mix. So you have sometimes multiple levels to have a bit more specificity. But still, it works for 80,000 people. And this is one of the largest companies, if you want, in the space. So probably it could scale beyond that.
Let's dig a little bit deeper into that aspect. When you look at the VSM, you have two main mechanisms in the vertical control. One is the resource bargain channel, mm-hmm. and the other one is the corporate intervention channel. Sorry, mm-hmm. That complements the need for cohesion when horizontal coordination fails.
Yeah.
And
so the main difference is that I would say if you look at the systems of VSM, in the RenDanHeYi, some responsibilities are allocated mainly to one kind of node. So the industry platform has some kind of responsibility. The EMC has some kind of responsibility. The migrant enterprise has some kind of responsibility. Responsibilities are not shared. And this may be, an implication of Chinese culture, but they want to have somebody in charge. So there is always one person in charge for an ME, for an EMC, for an industry platform, maybe a small team, but somebody in charge. So bargaining, you do it constantly because there is no central allocation of resources. So if you want to get investment, you have to negotiate with an industry platform. If you want to have people, you have to negotiate with the people to convince them to join you. So everything is more or less the result of a negotiation. Escalation, if you want, or corporate intervention is not that common. The system is self-organized in the sense that an EMC could fail. A migrant enterprise could fail or could get in trouble, but the people within them will find a solution. So, for example, if the leader of a migrant enterprise is not bringing results, the team could decide to have a different leader. The team, not the boss, not the CEO. The team itself would say, we are not doing well. I think I could do better. It happened. This is an example from Japan, in which the boss was a male, senior, and then there was a lady that felt she was much better than the boss. And she managed to become the first boss and to be elected to be the boss of the migrant enterprise, basically destroying what is typical in Japanese culture. But this happened a lot. The same happens in the EMC. So if a node is not performing in a EMC, other nodes can decide to replace it. And maybe there is some time, a few months, in which you try to support the node, you try to find solutions, but eventually, if the EMC is not performing, the nodes are responsible for it. So the escalation is really not that common. If escalation is needed, the industry platform as a tool for escalation, there is investment. Say, okay, sorry, you are not doing what you said you were going to do. The budget is finished. So, you're in trouble at that point. You need to find other solutions. But it's not the typical vertical escalation. It's more peer-to-peer pressure. And again, Mark was asking about trust. Much of this social pressure is, again, peer-to-peer, because every time you get into a contract, you get evaluated by the others. It's like, on Amazon, you get stars. This node got 5 stars. This node won because they didn't perform as expected. The quality of their work was not up to expectations and so on. So in the future, you're not going to be invited to a new EMC because people don't trust you. So the trust is given by the system and not by the top management. So if you behave, you will get more opportunities, more growth, more revenues. If you don't, well, you'll be expelled by the system. So the system patrols itself, in a sense. And that means that some of the systems in the VSM just doesn't exist in the RenDanHeYi because it's peers controlling you more than a system on top controlling you.
Okay. The next question I have is, who thinks about the future? If the one part is, of course, if you have a close relationship between the customer-focused teams or customer-facing teams and their customers, and that's the part sensing, but it's not a consistent direction of the whole company or an area in the company. How does that happen? How do we translate from sensing into a sense of meaningful direction of the
Strictly speaking, there is no strategy. So the strategy is distributed. So there are 4,000 units doing strategy. The only centralized part is industry platform. So the industry platform won't create a strategy, but will nudge the system to go in some preferred directions instead of others. But it's still, a participative exercise. There is no one industry platform. There are many industry platforms. So each one of them will push for its own goals. And still, EMCs, ecosystem micro communities, and micro enterprises are free to decide if they want to support the goal of an industry platform or not. So there is no system looking for the strategy because, again, it's like a forest. What's the strategy of a forest? Probably surviving, probably expanding, probably getting more light, probably, letting other life forms to thrive because this could pollinate them and so on. But it's a distributed process. It's not there is one big tree deciding for the other trees. The only aspect on which there is a centralization is the design itself. So the design in higher terms is centralized. The fact that there is profit sharing, there are EMCs, micro enterprise, this is centralized. It's Jiang Zemin so far, it's the board so far deciding it. And if you want, the existence of industry platform is centralized. That's the only form of centralization. The rest is self-managed. And it's not perfect. So maybe, okay, they spent 1 billion in the wrong thing. Fine. They're okay with that. Or maybe there are 3 micro enterprises competing for the same customer segment. This is not optimal. Fine. One of them will just die because there is no traction in the market. So this is not a neat organized system. It's very this Northern would say this is a messy coherence, right? So it's coherence, but not in the way we would expect, especially in the West. Oh, yeah, there are many questions.
Okay. Yep. Mark, you had a question?
Yes. Well, I've been saying all my questions. I just wanted to share an image I can't get out of my head. Everything I've heard you say, I've read other people saying similar things, but what I think, here's the picture that comes to my mind. The others, meaning me and lots of other people, are trying to do the kind of stuff you're talking about, but you could see us running along a rail platform completely burdened down with luggage.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys have dropped your luggage, the old stuff that we can't get away from, and you're just running forward with all the ideas we have, but you're actually not dragging the luggage into the elevator. That may not be of interest to anyone, but I am blown away, not by the uniqueness of what you said, but by the luggage you're not dragging with you.
Yeah, Jiang Zemin, let me say diplomatically, invited 12,000 managers to find themselves a job in the firm. So you are no longer a manager. You need to do work. So get yourself a micro enterprise but you will be gone. So in the past, this hasn't been so peaceful. And in China, the rules are a bit different, to be sincere. But still, the point to me is that there are many corporations. We are working in India, we are working in Germany, we are working in Italy. We have been working in Latin America with that hospital, Mark.
I got to hear about this.
Yeah.
Later.
And there are no profit doing the same, and there are communication agencies, and there are software development firms with thousands of people or tens of people currently applying these principles. So this is no longer higher. They launched, let's say, the idea, and then each one of them somehow tweaked the idea to the specific aspects. And I will give you just one example. Last year, I was in Qingdao with Jiang Zemin. There is, it's like Buddha, I don't know, of modern times. It's a bit weird to interact with him because it's very inspirational, but sometimes difficult to understand because everything is a metaphor. And he starts talking from Cicero and then goes to Drager. So it's, fancy experience. But together with me, there was this company from Italy. They are 80 people. I think the older person is 30 years old. They came to one of our trainings, and after they disappeared. And then after 6 months, they came back to me and said, "We did it." What? Everything you said, we have done it. Oh, yeah, we have applied everything. Migrant enterprises, EMC, we did it. But our people wouldn't understand the RenDanHeYi. So we call the migrant enterprises kitchens, Italians. We call the migrant enterprise leader chefs. And we call the EMC the food market. And we call when you create a new entity, they call it the restaurant and so on. So basically they translated all these difficult and boring concepts in something palatable for a population of young people with no organization design, economics, culture that are into communication. And they've launched 16 migrant enterprises, transforming young employees into entrepreneurs. And the two founders did that because even if they are 30 years old, they feel too old to understand the market. So they feel that their colleagues are better equipped to understand what to do. And they said, there are many migrant enterprises we would have decided not to create. We didn't believe in them, and we were wrong because they knew better. So if we didn't let them go and maybe fail, we would have failed because we don't understand many of the technologies that came up in the last 2 years, and they are 30 years old. So to me, and that's another fancy story, how Fujitsu came to the RenDanHeYi. This is public, so I'm not sharing any secret. Fujitsu is a big corporation of professional IT services. Well, one of their clients has them one IT guy, professional services. It took them 6 months to go through all the approvals to let this guy join the client. When they went back to the client told them, listen, I got, an IT resource the following week. I asked you. So you are too slow. In those 6 months, I created one unicorn, $1 billion. So they thought, well, maybe there is something about us that is not working as expected. We are too bureaucratic. So let's learn from Hire. And that's how they came into the RenDanHeYi and they applied it to Western Europe, a number of business units, and they doubled the revenues the following year. So at the end, it just works. That's it. So it's not so, Hire doesn't talk about complexity, doesn't talk about complex adaptive system. They have found something that works for them, but to me that addresses needs that are not unique to Hire at all. They're still, a bit challenging for most of the market, but not unique.
Marcus had a question. I sort of wished he'd gone first.
Yes, thank you. About the salaries, the remuneration of the people, you said an ME, which hires a manager. The manager is not paid concerning to or in function of agreements about the salary, but always in function of the results of the micro enterprise.
Yeah.
Now, what kind of results are you looking at, and who sets them?
So not only the manager, because there is no manager, there's a micro enterprise lead, but also the team members are paid by the results. The results there are. So if we have canvases, you may have a look if you want. So there is a VAM canvas. But in the VAM canvas, you have 2 types of goals. So one is the direct results, so typically revenues that you generate or profit that you generate. It could be penetration. So basically, it's something measurable connected to the goals that you have at some inflection point. So at VAM, it's like saying, it's a bet saying, the next 6 months, I'm going to achieve this. The next 12 months, I'm going to achieve that. In the next 1 year, I'm going to achieve that. And I want to have these investments, these resources, these services from Hire to do that. But the second type of objectives, it's ecosystemic. So it's value not for yourself, but for the system. So let's say that I'm creating knowledge or I'm getting intimate with some customers. This is an asset for the company. Maybe it's not money, but it's value for the company. Or maybe I'm reducing cost, for example, warehouse cost or production costs for other people. So this is value for others, and I'm still measured on it, even if this is not money for my micro enterprise. So there are 2 different kinds of, they call it leading targets, and they set themselves. So the micro enterprise negotiates the leading targets with the industry platform. They're called leading targets because they are ambitious. So that's the detail. You are not expected to do 1% better, 3% better. You have to do 100% better, 50% better than the market. So the only ask that Hire has is to do much, much better than the market average, because the Migrant Enterprise is expected to reduce organizational and technical debt. So they are invited to disrupt, to create something new, to improve a lot. That's the only expectation that Hire has. And again, this will emerge in the conversation with the industry platform. But once the VAM has been signed, well, you can say, I'm going to give 20% of the profit of my Migrant Enterprise. And maybe it's a Migrant Enterprise doing 10 millions. So you are keeping 2 millions for the team. There is no cap, it's not variable pay, it's profit sharing. So if you are good, well, the results could be impressive. If it fails, it fails. You will find yourself a different role. There is a talent pool. So it's like a bench on which people are put while they find something else to work on. So you have, if you want, you have the best of two worlds, so the entrepreneurship, because you are still an employee, but you have the freedom, the possibility, and also the resources of a typical corporation.
Now,
not bad for me.
With whom, if I'm a lead or a micro enterprise, with whom do I agree about the targets?
With industry platforms.
Micro-enterprise.
With industry platforms. So with the industry platform, it's like talking with a VC. You go there and say, you pitch and say, I want to create this service. I want to have 1 million of investment. In 3 years, I will do that. Now, you need to do a bit more for 1 million. Okay, I will do a bit more for 1 million. Done. Signed, you go. And at that point, starting from there, you manage profit and loss. You manage the team. You do everything.
But anyway, there's a clear hierarchy between platform. There's a management.
It's not a hierarchy. It's a contract.
Yeah, it's a contract, because I think the problem with thinking in terms of
VSM,
sorry, the problem with thinking in terms of the VSM is that you think in terms of System 3, and System 3 doesn't exist, and that's the problem. All the functions of System 3 can be done in System 2, and I think that's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
I think I'm very inspired by this, because this is this is how my thinking has been going for a long time now about the best way to organize everything, I guess, in that you start with autonomy and then you federate into these ecosystems that work together. Yeah. And I mean, Mark will know I bang on incessantly about the cooperatives in Emilia-Romagna around Bologna. And there are 40,000 very small family-based cooperatives. And somebody will see an opportunity and they'll say, if we can work together, we can fulfill this contract. And it sounds like pretty much what these what the EMCs are doing, that they federate for a particular job. And the thing I like about it is that the whole thing's based on collaboration and working together and the synergies that come out of that. And I would disagree wholeheartedly with Robin that System 3 has a really important function and should be right at the heart of most enterprises. But what I'd be interested in is, how long do the EMCs last? I mean, do they last for decades, or is it for very short-term contracts? And
it depends. It depends on the user scenario they are looking after. It could be years or it could be months. It could be, how do you call it? Basically, an association for a single tender. It depends.
Okay. And John, do you have the same question?
Let me just interject really quickly on the System 3 thing before it goes away. I don't want to, slow anyone else down, but the shared services, I was so happy to see you use that term, because in my rendition of the VSM, Sophie VSM, shared services is a key thing that System 3 provides. So no matter what we call it, you do have a way to have shared services in your model. It's just not, the resource bargain is by contract, not by any monolithic means. It's amazing. Go. I'm sorry, Angela, take off.
Angela.
Yeah, thank you. I just I feel very curious because I know that you have a background also in sociocracy and holocracy, and you are now getting into BSM. So I have more than one question, but the first one is, if you, from your experience, what is the main difference between this approach and, for instance, sociocracy? How is it different?
So my main problem with sociocracy has always been the scalability. Not because it's hierarchical in traditional terms, because it's not, but the domains, whether you call them domains in holacracy or anyway, the responsibility of a circle are encapsulated, so they are hierarchical. That means that if you have double linking, for those that don't know sociocracy, it means that you don't have managers, but you have two different people, two links connecting the upper circle and the lower circle. And together they have the role of a manager. One is representing the lower circle, one is representing the upper circle. But still, if you want to have a meeting with all the people in the circle, you can only have that many people in the circle. Otherwise, your meeting will go on and on forever. So if you have thousands of people, you need many levels. Many levels means transactional cost. So again, this doesn't scale. If you have thousands of people, this doesn't scale. And you go into representative scheme. So you need to have somebody representing others, but not really synthesizing what others want through consent. So it's no longer, to me, it's no longer sociocracy. It's a democratic, let's say, approach, but not sociocratic. In the RenDanHeYi, the power is that you have hundreds of thousands of people. We didn't talk about it, supported by technology, without any or not much, let's say, hierarchical layers. To me, that's unique. I had never seen it in practice, and that was the missing piece for me. Whether that's holacracy or sociocracy, you don't have it, and that's why you don't see many huge organizations adopting sociocracy. I've been working with ING and sociocracy, but again, it was senior teams, but only a few layers, not the rest of the organization, because it's difficult to manage thousands of people like that.
Continuing with this line of thought, I've been very interested in comparing BSM and holocracy and sociocracy. Actually, John and me are now writing about that and for the Oxford conference. And one of the criticisms that I have of sociocracy, for instance, is precisely that they can call a circle. Anything can be a circle. What we will call in BSM a system one, an operational unit that produce the value. In sociocracy can be a circle, but also a circle can be the ones managing resources or the ones doing strategy or whatever. And this lack of differentiation between the basic purpose of a particular team, for me, can become extremely complex over time, because if the organization is very, very, very big, then, as you say, then you have to have representatives, and the level of interaction and communication between the different circles becomes very, very messy. And as you say, that will stop this kind of model to be used massively in a very large organization without creating a lot of conflict. So I'm very interested with your response, and I would like to explore further the relationship with the BSM, because I mean the idea of meta system, what we call meta system in BSM, like the system 2, 3, 4, 5, in your approach, it is mostly done by the platforms, no? The platform that provides services, and the industry platform that sort of provides direction or strategy or whatever.
Yeah, but true. But I think there's a difference. I don't know if I can say that the systems have a hierarchical, order. But maybe not. But in the RenDanHeYi, even shared service platforms are subject to the same forces that other enterprises are. So, well, you may create an HRSSP, but if your colleagues are not happy with what you do, with the value for money you give, you no longer exist. So even internal functions, and this is where, the bureaucracy goes to hide in traditional organizations. Even traditional support functions should see the market and should create value, because the thing I didn't say is that if you are not happy with your HR colleagues, you can go and get the same service from the market. If you are not happy because the legal team is maxed out, you can go and buy the service in the market. So your colleagues have competition from the market. They have to give value for money. So there is no tyranny of some systems on the others, because the others can always have a different choice. So they will pick the strategy services or the support services only if that's convenient and effective for them. Otherwise, they have freedom. So it's still a matter of transactional cost. If that's cheaper for them or the quality is better, they will go with internal service. Otherwise, they will go to the market.
But
So for me, yeah,
there is one more question, and then I'll allow the others to continue. In a bubble system, the role of system 2, for instance, the anti-oscillatory role, is very important because it is the one in which sort of creates common languages and common norms, the rules of the game. How do we avoid competition and collisions between the different systems operational units?
You don't. In higher, you don't. So they want to have competition and collaboration at the same time, where it makes sense. The only necessity, and I agree with you, is common language. Exactly. Of course, this is very difficult, and I see it every day in the organizations I work with. The question is, who is so crazy to do this? Very often, I got this question from Forbes. So the language is difficult and everything is in flux. So there is lots of effort as trying to create a playbook, a manual of how to do things. This is a centralized responsibility, but not in the sense that this is the boss. They have a special platform that is called Culture Platform, within which there is the Higher Research Model Institute with which we work. So they have the responsibility to learn from what is happening on the ground, to codify it, to clean it, to spread the word. So there is somebody in charge of studying the reality and translating the reality, for example, to onboard new colleagues. But they are not above the others. They're just one like the others with a specific role. There is this one. Definitely, this is the difficult part, though.
Marcus, want to?
Yes. Someone said that they are doing everything via system 2 and there's no system 3. Let me bring an alternative view. Couldn't we say that this whole negotiation of contracts, or these contracts between ME and platform, that's a typical 3-1 relationship? And we have a lot of other things in the system 2, which are important and which we cannot place in that line. So we have information systems, we have standards, and we have a lot of other things. So that would be a proposal.
I would argue from the ecological perspective that there is no ecological system which has a system 3. And therefore, why do human beings need such a thing?
Well, may I just replicate? Nature, an Amazon wood, it's not the same as a social organization. So I think we must differentiate here.
And there's one other interesting differentiation between a biological organism and an ecosystem. In VSM,
a biological, an organization, and the organization can be called ecosystems, and they can be structured like that, and the biological systems, all of that rests in the thinking of emergence and self-organization, etc. But I think one must look. I mean, in the Amazon, you don't have someone to negotiate goals the way we have it in social organizations. So I think there are slight differences.
But they are negotiated. I mean, in a sense, the plants and the animals are negotiating all the time with each other.
Well, you are arguing by analogy. And I think we should not argue here by analogy, but only by isomorphy and homomorphy.
If I could just interject something that I think is related. I think last Thursday, maybe it was a Thursday before, Robin and I were in a call with some people from Arizona, and this issue came up, and my mind immediately jumped to analogy, because I'm a huge fan of the VSM. And I just started going, okay, so the biggest animal that I'm aware of is the blue whale. And then I learned that there's actually a tree that's much, much bigger than the blue whale. But my point is, there seems to be some upper limit on size, and yet things still seem to get done. And so that's where I wrote that little piece that I put in here about, whales and ecosystems. And I think you have some kind of a jump. I don't know exactly what it is, but I think Emanuele has really come as close as anyone I've ever heard. How do you jump from the size scaling problem of biology or organizations to the next level? And the next level, in my limited understanding of terminology, is an ecosystem. So how do you jump from a big top-down or well-coordinated organism like a whale or even a big tree to something bigger? And I think it's an ecosystem. As near as I can tell, ecosystems mostly function on system 2 kind of things.
I wanted to stress one other point, because an animal organism has an outer boundary, and an ecosystem does not have necessarily an outer boundary. It's more it's open. And if you look at higher, it's strong. It's strongly organized like an open system. And if you look at the description of VSM, it's more the analogy of a closed system or an organism.
Exactly.
And this has implications in what vocabulary you have, and what are the first order citizens in the vocabulary.
I think
their description is of the world we experience. And so I don't become religious about much of anything, but I think there is a really interesting functional question between bounded organisms and ecosystems. And I think that this whole talk has been about that.
Yeah, if you want, this is more a swarm than a biological system. We are not talking so much about the ship, but we are talking about the set of ships, not the captain, but the admiral trying to define, let's say, what's the name of the group of ships? Doesn't come to mind right now.
Armada.
Yeah, sort of armada. If you want to see it in a
war.
Yeah, in a
flotilla.
Yeah, a sort of flotilla. Yes, agreed. So the question is, it's more about how to create the conditions to enable the ecosystem to thrive than to manage any tree. I think that's what leadership is in the RenDanHeYi. And to me, most of the wicked problems we have in the world require that kind of leadership. It's more about bringing countries or entities, organizations together than designing the right organization or the right country. So it's more, yes, open systems.
Perhaps there's some work that's done in permaculture which might be relevant to this, and they found that if you look at any ecosystem of animals and plants, they have these things they call guilds, and a guild of plants will work together, and they complement each other, and it's very much that they are cohering into what we call a higher level wholeness of a higher level recursion. And you can duplicate that in agriculture, where there are certain plants. I think it's a thing called the Three Sisters, which is corn and I think pumpkins and something else. But I think there's something quite crucial here in the governance of networks. That I mean, the viable system model says, okay, we'll take these autonomous system ones and bring them together, and it can do things that the parts can't do in isolation, which is exactly what the EMCs are doing. And I think within a network, when you can identify that, which again is a metasystemic function, as Mark has said, and I'd be interested to see how the EMCs are created in the first place from all these autonomous smaller units. But I think there's a complementarity here, and that out of a network you can create these federations for either a limited time or longer. And I think that's how things are going to have to work.
I think maybe the only difference is that the community has a clear goal. So it's not a community of interest. It's not for sharing knowledge. It's really for achieving something. Again, this may be a specific connotation given by hire, but the EMCs for them are really, let's come together because there is something I cannot do in isolation. Let's get it done. When it's done, we can disbundle, and at the same time, you can be part of many EMCs, so it should be one. Each EMC exists for a reason, let's say, a very strong reason. The guilds in other models are more birds of a feather, so trying to stay with the like-minded people. Hire has a bit of that, but through software mechanisms.
Well, why don't you explain a little bit more about what you are saying, Emanuele, regarding software and technology? Because you did mention that it is very important, the technology, to make this happen. So
yeah, when I was talking about the EMC contract, in China at least, the EMC contract is managed through a smart contract. And the system is really a blockchain. So they built the technology through the blockchain to reduce the need for middlemen and bureaucracy. So when you sign an EMC contract, the contract is automatically executed. Once you have reached the targets, the value gets distributed among the different nodes as expected by the contract. There is no manager, there is nobody taking charge of that. It's encoded into the blockchain. And I must say that the reputation is a bit like that. Each migrant enterprise is sort of a banking account. So you need to see how you are doing, like a banking account, your profits, but also your losses, your costs. The services you exposed should be in the system. Otherwise, you don't know who to involve into an EMC or who to hire into a migrant enterprise. So to scale it, technology is really important. But I think this is a clear trend. If you look at what Bureaucracy is doing, Morningstar are doing, they have been encoding these many-to-many relationships into a system. And there was a question about that. All of this is transparent. So you can go in the system and see how other nodes are performing. Why? Because this is a source of learning. You can copy what others are doing or avoiding what others are doing. There are many examples. Whole Foods Market doing this. So transparency is used as a sort of social pressure, as a source of opportunity. We are working on a technology to do that because the system that Hire has is very Chinese, not because the labels are in Chinese, but because the thinking is very Chinese, and it's very difficult to use outside from their space. So whether that's a blockchain or not, technology is needed to make it scale.
We are having a lot of conversations with the DAOs and the blockchain community, because they also are very interested in the BSM. And there are some of the people that we've been talking with that are using BSM and are very interested in seeing how BSM can sort of cover some of the governance needs when you put into practice a blockchain on things like that. So, I mean, really exciting possibilities of learning and discovering. But what you are telling us, I think that we are all really, really fascinated with the opportunities and the possibilities of seeing these principles in practice, because what you are doing is, I guess, that is highly percent compatible with the BSM if you understand BSM as we do, as a really way to create an approach for self-organization and self-governance, completely distributed. Yeah. But to see that in practical terms and with the amount of success that you have is really challenging, really, really exciting.
There is at least one company that is using both BSM and RenDanHeYi, and that's Bosch. Again, Mark Lamberts is part of them, and we are working with Bosch globally. And of course, one of the question is how to integrate the RenDanHeYi with BSM. The other one is how to integrate it with SAFE, because they are using other models, of course. So it's happening. My interest to BSM increased because I've seen it in customers, let's say, organizations. So I wanted to understand more about, okay, what's that? How does it work? And what are the interlocks with what we are trying to do? So I think the philosophical inspiration is very similar. There are some differences due probably to the timing in which Sufferbeard created it. But I think the direction is common, and some ideas from the VSM could be used to this as a checklist of what you are trying to do with the RenDanHeYi.
Yeah, I think Stafford, he called those things functions for good reason. As a function, I think, as near as I can tell from listening to you, everything you've described takes care of every one of those functions as a function, not as a thing, as a function, as something that mathematically has to happen. And so that's where the mapping, I think, could be useful for, people who have a lot of experience in the BSM. You don't jump off a ship that you know how to sail onto one you don't, I mean, that's stupid. So how can we make it easy, for people who are VSMers to understand the extra degrees of freedom that you create without losing the functions that every living system has to take care of.
You read, yeah.
I'm slowly running out of questions. You have more questions. It's not a secret that let's be talked before the webinar and coordinate that.
Well, I do have one question. What's the best way to learn about? What's the best way to learn about this? I mean, this is like an amazing introduction, but how? I mean, some of us, live by doing things, and what's the best way for us to learn about this and go do experiments? I'm working in neighborhoods who really want to do experiments.
So first of all, I wanted to touch on the no-profit aspect. I will look. Let me see if I can find the example. Okay, I will do that. But there is one example in Central America. So they are trying to use the RenDanHeYi to support people without resources. So transforming, let's say, poor people into entrepreneurs. And we'll see if they find the right resources. But again, if you remove the profit as the forcing function in the system and use something else, this could be applied to government, or this could be applied to, no profit. And this is the typical question we get at the master classes. And this brings me to the next question. So we have different ways to learn. I think the best one is a masterclass. We do a 4-half-day masterclass in which, more than listening to me, you apply the concepts. And this is not for the faint-hearted, so it's not really, it's for very advanced people with lots of experience, whether that's sociocracy, holacracy, ING. It's people coming with the from different sides that try to connect the dots and to trick the RenDanHeYi themselves. And we're going to run the next masterclass, let's say after the summer. So happy to have you. I would be personally interested to have you because you bring a different perspective. So I would be interested to learn from you in the masterclass. And the masterclass is, a bit of introduction, but then it's applying these concepts to a specific case through the canvases, working in groups. So you will find other people from corporations or experts, freelancers that try to apply these in practice. So create a migrant enterprise, an EMC, VAM, and so on. And that's where I think the best questions came out.
We have to come to Italy. Not that that's
no, that's online.
It's online.
If you want, happy to meet you, but this is online, and I think Krishan can comment on that if he wants. Yeah, you'll find people from.
I can recommend that. I can recommend that masterclass. I attended, I think, 3 years ago, 2 years ago.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
I think Chris and I will come. I can almost guarantee you. Yeah, great.
Thank you. I will. So let's stay in touch, and I will share the link.
Okay, so any more questions? So thank you very much, Emanuele, and thank you all for the questions. And let's finish this webinar.
Thank you so much. Really a pleasure.
Thank you, Emanuele. Absolutely.
Yeah, it was great, man. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Okay.
Feel free to connect.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.